In our classes, we began to explore the question why the Levites don't come in, why there seems to be this 2-year period of stagnation. You can explain it by looking at the lines, and they teach you that the harvest for 4 groups follow one after another consecutively without any gaps. So if we're in the harvest for the priests now, what immediately follows is the harvest of the Levites, and we can just explain it away like that. It all seems relatively straightforward and simple. Until you begin to ask yourself some questions. What we've done is we've taken a line, we'll call it the line of Adventism, begins in 1798, goes all the way to the Second Advent. Then we took that line and what did we do with it? We took that big line, over 200 years old, and what did we do with it? My brother, what did we do with that line? We took it as a line of progression. So any line, by definition, has to be a line of progression. So that wasn't what I was looking for, but we have to understand a line is always a line of progression. Has to be. Cannot repeat within the line. We break it down, and I'm not asking what the breakdown is, but what is the logic to break it down? I'm not asking for the methodology. Why do we want to break it down?
Because we want to give our own history or our own principles.
So, just as Nebuchadnezzar had this dream, just as Daniel was required to understand, 6 chapters later, the focus of attention is what? What should our focus of attention be? What was it for Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel 2? What does Daniel tell him his focus of attention was? Sister Joy? Did you say, repeat the question? We had this line, which I've called line of Adventism. It's over 200 years old. Begins in 1798, goes to the end of the world, Second Advent. I said, what do we do with that line? So, my brother says we do what? We break the line down. So, my question is, why do we break the line down? And I think I also asked him, how or why do we break the line? He says, to do what?
To get our own place in that history.
To understand our own history. So, I asked, what is the importance or relevancy of that? Why are we doing that? And I said, you see the same issue, the same dynamics occurring in Daniel chapter 2. At least Daniel chapter 2, and you also see it in Daniel chapter 8, but particularly in Daniel chapter 2. Any thoughts? The question is, we have this long line. My brother says we're going to break the line to focus on our own history. And I'm asking, what is that? What is our history? Why would we do that? What's the purpose of that? And I asked, Nebuchadnezzar has a focus. He has a particular issue. And what is that? What's he thinking about when he goes to bed?
So the question is about Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah, so the question was, you can find this phenomena, this issue, being addressed in Daniel chapter 2. And I'm asking, what is that issue? What is on Nebuchadnezzar's mind? Because it's what's on everyone's mind.
Nebuchadnezzar is thinking about his kingdom
So Nebuchadnezzar's thinking about his kingdom.
and how long it's going to take. And he thinks it's going to last forever.
He thinks it's going to last forever. Which verse are we in? Not sure? Put your hand up if you know the verse. You have an idea? Daniel chapter 2, verse... Just shout out the number if anybody... Well, put your hand up. Please don't shout. Okay, so if no one has an idea, we're all looking for it. We'll just go to verse 28. Is that the verse you're referring to, Sister Joy? Yeah? So verse 28. Every word has its significance. We're going to ask, what's the most important thought? What's the subject at hand? So what are the most important phrase or words in this verse? Latter days, if you're okay with that. God in heaven has revealed secrets and made known to Nebuchadnezzar what's going to happen in the last days, because that's what he was thinking about. So God is going to answer the prayer of Nebuchadnezzar. In fact, you see this theme again brought to view in chapter 10, verse 14. Chapter 10, verse 14, you see the same issue. Gabriel is going to come and do what? Without even turning to the verse. What's Gabriel going to do, my brother? What's Gabriel going to do? Chapter 10. Gabriel's going to do what? He's going to explain to Daniel what happens in the latter days. Verse 14, 10:14. Now I come to make thee understand what shall befall thy people in the latter days, for yet the vision is for many days. Nebuchadnezzar had a problem. It's brought to view in chapter 3. All he can think about is himself and his people. Are we okay with that? Daniel chapter 3. The image of gold. And we know that stands in contradiction to chapter 2. Yep. So he already knows the answer, that his kingdom is going to be destroyed. It's going to be given to other people. But he doesn't like that because he has a way of thinking. Now, I don't know if we've spoken about it here at this school or I've mentioned it in other places. Daniel would have learned his lesson there in Daniel chapter 2. What was the lesson? What is God trying to teach people? What's going to happen in the latter days? Yeah? It's all about the latter days. If you go to the structure of chapter 2, where's the focus and attention? It's all at the feet. It's all at the end. So Daniel should have realized and understood this. If you go to chapter 7, you see the same phenomena. The focus and attention is in the last beast, the head of that beast, the horns of that beast, the additional horn that comes, and it only lightly touches the first three beasts. Are we okay with that? So God is preparing the mind and heart of Daniel all through his experience. He then comes to the third year of Belshazzar, and what's he going to be tested on? What's going to happen? Latter days. That's what he's going to be tested on, isn't it? Does he pass or fail the test? Pass or fail? Fails the test. What happens to him at the end of the chapter? What's his experience? He says, I don't, which makes him What kind of a virgin? So Daniel is a foolish virgin. Are we okay with that? Sometimes we don't conceptualize him as being foolish, because in chapter 1, what is he? Wise. Chapter 2, what is he? Wise or foolish? What does he not understand? In chapter 2, what does he not understand? He says, Lord, I don't understand the times. You're the one who controls time. You need to explain what all this time is about. And God's going to explain to him. He doesn't have knowledge on this issue. So you think he would have picked that up in chapter 1, but he hadn't. So he has this up and down experience which we tend never to focus on because we idolize Daniel. So he's not doing well in chapter 8. He's foolish. We okay with that? So he becomes a symbol of an Ethiopian eunuch. What's the problem between the two of them? Neither of them understand. Can they read the words? But they don't understand. Chapter 9 comes, and what's Daniel going to do? Read the words. He still doesn't understand. So he's going to repent. What's he repenting about? His lack of understanding. He's repenting for his lack of understanding. So Gabriel is going to come in chapter 9 and he's going to teach him what? What will he teach him? Teach him back time. He'll teach him about the latter days. It's a common theme all through that. It's a theme that I want us to see this morning. You can have other themes. How does Gabriel teach him about the latter days? Daniel chapter 8. What year does it end? What year does it end in? 1844. So I'm going to ask the question, what year does the vision of Daniel chapter 8 end in? Okay, so we've changed our answer now. Now we've gone to 1798. Put your hand up if you understand. Sorry, if you don't understand or you don't agree. Chapter 8 takes you to 1798. Put your hand up. If you don't put your hand up, I'm not going to explain it. Okay, so now you put your hands up. Okay, perhaps we use that technique. Okay, my sister, you're not sure why we say 1798. Why are you not sure about that? What do you think it could be? What have you been told it is?
Because in the prophecy of Daniel 8 verse 14, unto 2,300 days and the sanctuary shall return. So my understanding, I guess it's 1844.
No, you didn't guess. You know it is. Yeah? So either someone told you, you read it, or you should get it straight from Ellen White. You have a start date. Yes? 4:57. It's right here on the chart, if we could see it. It's hidden here, 4:57. Going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem. The commencement of the 2300 days of Daniel chapter 8 and chapter 9. So it's there right on the chart. The pioneers understood it. They believed it. In fact, this is the unsealing of the book of Daniel. That piece of information, 4:57, unseals the book of Daniel. They use a methodology. What's the methodology they're going to use if that's the unsealing? Day for a year. Okay, they're going to use day for a year, and they've got the unsealing. So all the numbers come out. On the chart says 1843 on one of the charts. In fact, we have them the other way around. It's normally the other way around. So this chart, it says 1844. It's just tucked in down there. And this one says 1843. So I'm assuming everybody understands the logic of all of that. So some of us have said Daniel chapter 8 ends in 1798. I asked Daniel chapter 9, where does that take you to? So we all agree, hopefully, it takes you to the latter days. We haven't explained that, but just taking the theme, because I'm asking the same question. So Daniel chapter 8 takes you to the latter days. You're reasonably familiar with Daniel chapter 8. Where does the vision of Daniel chapter 8 end? The verse. Which verse does it end in, my sister?
The vision.
Verse 14. So I'm going to give you another question now. In verse 13, what's the first thing that we see happening to Daniel in verse 13? Just the first few words. What does he say? Just the first few words. Don't read the rest of the verse. Verse 13.
That what Daniel says.
Tell me the important word in the first few words. Just verse 13. Don't read the rest of the verse. It'll confuse you. Sorry? How does he know someone's speaking? Tells you just before. How does he know someone's speaking? Okay, so verse 13, he hears. You agree with that? Go to verse 2. What are we looking for now? Remember the subject, reason from cause to effect. I took you to verse 13, heard. Taking to verse 2. What word am I looking for? No, don't help her. Saw. So could you see that for yourself before they shout it out? Yeah. Okay, so verse 2, he sees, and verse 13, he hears. So you see a difference between the two. Okay? Verse 2, what does he see?
A vision.
So verse 2, he sees a vision. Verse 13, what does he hear? Don't say anything, please. He hears. So he hears people speaking. It says a saint, but when you read the verse, there's two people speaking. So he hears people speaking in verse 13, and in verse 2, he sees the vision. Okay? So now I'm going to ask you the same question. Which verse does the vision end in chapter 8? You know what vision it is, because it says in verse 2, I saw the vision. When does it end? Verse 12. You say that with confidence? Everybody agree? Yeah? Even those people who said 1844 and they don't understand 1798, they agree that it ends in verse 12. Yeah? So the vision ends in verse 12, and then he hears something. Okay? It doesn't say he hears a vision, it just says he hears people speaking. So if you want to, we'll say he hears a vision, if you can do that. Can we say, can you hear visions and not see them? So visions you have to see, you can't. Okay, you can only see visions. I guess you're saying because the word vision is connected to eyes. So what do you hear? If you only see visions, what can you hear? Voices. So what would you call that if a prophet hears? If you were sleeping, you'd say she had a dream. If she sees something, you'd say she had a vision. What about if she hears something? What do you call that? Abraham, when God wakes him up and he says, do this thing, he didn't see God, did he? He heard his voice. What did we say he had? An experience? Okay, so he has an experience then. We won't say he had a vision. So the vision ends in verse 12. Who does not understand why they said 1798? Put your hand up. There was quite a few people who didn't understand that or didn't agree with it. Put your hand up again. They'll be the same people. People who put their hand up before, can you just put it up again? Who didn't understand. So I just want to get higher so I can see you. No, there was about 15 of you. Why won't you put your hands up second time? What are you worried about? I want to help you. So I've got these two hands. Anyone else? Sister Jackie. So, we're in verse 12. Do you agree that's where the vision ends? Okay? So, this is not a study on Daniel chapter 8. If you're not familiar with it, I'll just say things as I understand them. Hopefully you'll agree. Daniel chapter 8. So, perhaps we should say a few, I don't know, maybe some controversial things. Verse 2, where is Daniel? I'm asking Sister Jackie. He's in Shushan? You agree with that? Okay. And he says he was by a river. He says the river Ulai. What river is that? It's a Persian word, the Ulai. And unlike the other Persian word in Daniel chapter 10, it's not easy to identify. It's not a common word. So in chapter 10, he's by the river Hiddekel. And if you go back to the Persian word Hiddekel, it's a Persian word, you can see that's a recognized river that we know in English. We know what river that is. What river is this, the Ulai? Do you know? Not sure? Okay, put your hand up. Anyone? Sorry? The river Euphrates. So that's the river Euphrates. Okay? So we won't prove that. We'll just state it as the fact that's the river Euphrates. So can Daniel be in Shushan and by the river Euphrates at the same time? Sister Jackie. Can he be at the river Euphrates and at Shushan at the same time? He can't be there at the same time. So you need to understand the geography of the country. Which country is this in real life? In real life, put your hand up.
Iraq.
So you have to know the geography of Iraq, and then you need to know the ancient history or geography of that locality, and the ancient name for that place is what? What's the ancient name? Do you know, Sister Jackie, of this land? No? Sister Dorcas? How many rivers have we mentioned? You said no, and you didn't even know my question. How many rivers have we mentioned? 2 rivers. Which chapters? Which chapter? We're in this chapter, so it's chapter 8. What other chapter? Do you remember what I said? No? Chapter 10. Okay? 2 chapters. chapter 8, chapter 10, two rivers. Do you remember the names? Ulai. The other one is Hiddekel. So we've got the Ulai and the Hiddekel. So the name of this country is the country of two rivers. That's the name of the country in English. The name of two rivers. Do you know what the name is, my sister? The ancient or the biblical name? You person either knows it or they don't know it. You're not sure? Okay, do you know my sister? We could call it Babylon, but Babylon isn't the right name. Do you know my sister? No? My brother? Shinar. It's the land of Shinar. If you look at the definition of the word of Shinar, it means, Sister Dorcas, it means what? The land? The land between two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. Okay? It's not that easy to know what river this is. The reason why I labour that point is if you go to any commentary, any Christian commentary, they'll all tell you what the Hiddekel is. Everyone knows it's the Tigris River. But when you come to chapter 8, verse 2, there's not a good understanding, not a common understanding of what river this is. People have all these different perspectives. So we're going to say, people disagree, he's literally in Shushan and he's having a vision about the Euphrates, and they're not at the same place. Are you okay with that, Sister Jackie? Yeah? So he's in Shushan, he has a vision while he's there, and when he's in the vision, where does he go to? To the river. He goes to the river Euphrates. So he has a vision while he's in Shushan, and in that vision, he finds himself where? It says in the verse, by the river Euphrates. Okay? The river Euphrates is a long river. Where do you think he would be in this vision when he's standing by the river Euphrates? My sister, where do you think he would go to? He's in Shushan, and he's going to have a vision there, and in that vision he sees himself by the river Euphrates. The river is a long river. Where in that river do you think he would be? He's in the country of Shinar. Where do you think on that river he would be? It's hundreds of miles long. Don't look at the verses, it won't help you. On the banks. He says he's on the banks. That's right. Which part of the river is he at? He's on the banks. At the beginning of the river, at the end of the river, in the middle somewhere. Anywhere there. Okay? So what he sees when we go further down, verse 3, he says, I lifted up my eyes and I saw, and there stood before the river, same river, a ram. And what's the ram doing? Verse 4. Pushing. So the ram is where? By the river. Are we okay with that? And he's pushing in different directions. Verse 6. What does it say about the ram now? He said he was by the river. He's pushing people away or pushing things away. And verse 6, I said verse 6? Verse 6, now what does it say about him? Don't help her.
Aram. There is Aram that is.
It's the same ram in verse 3. So we know it's the ram. I'm taking you to verse 6 because I want you to see something about the ram. Verse 3, he's before the river.
Yeah.
Verse 4, he's pushing everywhere. Pushing means making war. And verse 6, it says, what's he doing? Standing by the river. Be okay with that? He was standing before the river. So, when Daniel gets taken in vision from Shushan to the river, where is he? On that river. He's by the river, but he's by... What can he see? Okay, we can see that, yeah? This river is very long, a couple of 100 miles. How big is a ram? Small, isn't it? So a ram would be a point. So here's the ram. So if we do a bit of geography, Shushan's here. So where does he get taken to on this river? He's taken to the river where the ram is standing. Okay? The ram can't be standing everywhere. The ram is standing at a specific place. And that's where he gets taken to. We're okay with that? So this is turning into a study on Daniel chapter 8. I should have known that it would. So, we're going to drop back to verse 5. Verse 5, there's this ram standing by the river, pushing everything away. And that's verse 4. He's pushing all the beasts that would try to take his place by the river, and he's pushing them away. We agree with that? Yeah? He doesn't run after them, does he? If he ran after them, what would happen? He'd lose his place by the river. Yeah? So he stays by the river, and if someone comes, he pushes them away. He doesn't move from the river. Verse 6 confirms that he was standing by the river. He's by the river. If someone comes to the river, he pushes them away, and he stands there. So when people come to the river, it says, I said people. Verse 4 says what? Anyone? I said, if people come to the river, verse 4 says, beasts. Beasts, can we see that? What are the beasts doing, Sister Jackie? What are the beasts doing in verse 4? Where's the ram? What do the beasts want to do? They want to push the ram out of the way so they can be by the river. And the ram is going to stop them. He's going to push them away. Everybody wants to go to the river. So it's a big river, isn't it? My sister, big river? Why don't they just go to another part of the river? Why do they want to come to that part of the river? There must be something important there, yeah? You agree with that? They all want to go to that part of the river. So Daniel gets taken to which part of the river? The important part, where the ram is, where all the beasts want to go. Yeah? So, verse 5. As he was looking at this, one of those beasts that have tried to be coming to the river and they're being pushed away, one of them comes now. He tells you what beast it is. What beast is it? So a goat comes, and what's the ram going to do? Try to do? Push him away. But the goat wants his position, because he likes that position, it's an important position, and he comes with vigor or fury, verse 5. And what does he do in verse 6? He pushes against the ram. Verse 7, he comes close to the ram and he's angry. He hits the ram and does what? Okay, we'll say he kills the ram. When he kills the ram, what's he going to do? What's the goat going to do? Stand by the river at that same place. We all okay with that? And so we've done all about that. We're at this famous place on the river, important place. Yep. My sister, what place is this on the river? Need a bit more help? Okay. Who's the ram? Verse 3, it says, I saw a ram. Who is the ram? Don't shout out the answer, please. Are you not sure? Okay. How do you know? Just shout out the verse.
20.
Verse 20. So you go from verse 3 to verse 20. It tells you who the ram is. Who is the goat? You go from verse 5 to verse 21. Greece. Are we okay with that? And the rough goat is Greece. Says the king of Greece. I'm going to say just Greece. So you've got Medo Persia and Greece. So the Medes and the Persians, they're going to come and stand by the river. We want to know, where is this place that they want to stand by the river? So in order to do that, we'll go to Isaiah 46. No, Isaiah 45. We'll go to Isaiah 45, verse 1. We're in Isaiah 45 verse 1, and in fact I do want to go to Isaiah 46. I want to go to Isaiah 46 verse 11. 46:11. We're not going to study 46:11, but I'm going to say 40. Are we all there for Isaiah 46:11? Okay. We all read the verse? Did you read the verse, my sister? Yeah. Yep. So it's about a bird doing God's will. So I'm going to say Isaiah 46:11 is a repeat and enlarge of Daniel chapter 8, verse 3. Daniel chapter 8, verse 3. If you're taking notes, I'm going to say it's repeat and enlarge. Okay? Not asking if you agree with that. I'm saying, are we okay with that? Okay? So even if you don't see the connection, I'm going to explain it this way. There's this bird of prey, Isaiah 46. It comes from where? It comes from a far country or the east. A country that's far away in the east. It comes to a certain place, and because it's a ravenous bird, this is not the Hebrew. Well, just take the English. What does ravenous mean if you're ravenous? No, if you're ravenous. Sorry? No, you're taking the Hebrew. What does ravenous mean? Someone said over here. I heard someone shout out the right answer. If you're ravenous, it means... No, not bird of prey. You're going back to what the Hebrew means. I'm saying just take the English. Extremely hungry. That's what ravenous means, yeah? If I said, oh, I'm ravenous, it just means I'm very hungry. So this bird comes from the east. It's really hungry. And it's going to get to a place and it's going to begin eating. You okay with that? When it eats, it's going to fly down, land, and will it move around when it eats? No, it will be same spot, it will be standing. So I'm saying that when you go to Daniel 8:3 and you see this river and you see a ram standing by the river, that ram that's standing there is the same as the bird in Isaiah 46:11. Isaiah 46:11, it's a bird. In Daniel 8, it's a ram. We okay with that? Okay. So, I took us to Isaiah 45 verse 1. Sister Jackie, where are we on the river Euphrates? I'll read the verse. 45:1. Thus saith the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have holden, to subdue nations before him, and I will loose the loins of kings, to open before him the two-leaved gates, and the gates shall not be shut. Geography, where are we? Not historically. Where are we on the river Euphrates? Okay? We're at the place where the ram is, and the ram is the bird. We okay with that? Standing. So I've not made the connection, I've just given it to you. Then I said, go to 45 verse 1. And 45 verse 1 is about what? The destruction of? The destruction of what? 45 verse 1. Babylon. Go to 47. Go to 47 verse 1. Come down and sit in the dust, O virgin daughter of Babylon. Sit on the ground. There is no throne, O daughter of the Chaldeans, for thou shalt no more be called tender and delicate. What is that a description of? Destruction of Babylon. Sister Elizabeth, why does 47 look like the destruction of Babylon? One. I read 47:1. Tell me what you see there about the destruction of Babylon. How do you know Babylon's destroyed? The words? Very good answer. The words being used. Now you tell me which words are being used. No. From what? Because? Tell us the phrase. Because there is no throne. There's no throne. Therefore, there is no Babylon. When we say there's no Babylon, and we talk about the destruction of Babylon, what do we mean when we say the destruction of Babylon? The destruction of the city? No. The destruction of the kingdom, the throne. The city is intact. We okay with that? So this ravenous bird who's hungry is going to come and do what? Eat the flesh of Babylon. Yes? Good. Any questions thus far? Sister Jackie, where is Daniel in chapter 8 when he's in vision? That's where he is. He gets taken in vision by the river. Where is he? Bit more. Where is he on the river Euphrates? By the banks of the river. Where specifically? Where is that? I went to Daniel 8. I went to Isaiah 46, Isaiah 45, Isaiah 47. So where is he on this river? Let me ask a different question. Where is the ram? Why is he standing there? Ruling from. Where does Medo Persia, the ram, rule from? Which is where? The city of Babylon. Okay? Are we okay? Where is Daniel taken to? The most important part of the river is the city of Babylon. Are we okay with that? He's in the city of Shushan. He gets moved to the city of Babylon. And what's he going to see? He's not going to see the destruction of the Babylonian Empire, is he? That's already happened. Yes? It's already happened in the vision. He's going to see the Medo-Persians ruling from Babylon. Then they're going to be destroyed and the Greeks take over. Are we okay with that? You go through the verses, you get to verse 8, then he sees not another animal, but he sees a horn. Sorry, into verse 9. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceedingly great. So this horn is going to do various activities. And if you go to verse 12, what does verse 12 say? First part of the verse. First part of the verse, my brother, tells us what? Verse 9 says, a horn comes and destroys everything. Do you agree with that? Chapter 8, verse 9. And out of one of them came forth a little horn which waxed exceeding great toward the south, toward the east, toward the pleasant land. It destroys everything. That's my paraphrase. And verse 12, what happens? Yeah.
Verse 12. The force is given.
Don't read the verse to me, please. One of the skills of teaching is to be able to take a verse, break it down, reword it, reorder it, and put it into your own words so that someone can get the point of what the verse is teaching. Once they get the point, then you can break the verse down and prove that the point we want to make is true or false. But first, let's give them the point. Verse 9, this horn is destroying everything. Verse 12, it says what? Don't want you to do the whole verse for me, just the first part. Paraphrase the first part for me, if you want to know specifically what I want. You're not sure? My sister? Sorry? No, I did verse 9. I did the hard one, you do the easy one. Verse 12. First part of the verse. I'll go through it again. Verse 9, he destroys everything. Verse 12. What it says in verse 12 is not what it says in verse 9. I agree with that. I want you to tell me what it says in verse 12. I want a story. Tell me what's going on. No, not verse 10. Don't want verse 10. I just want verse 12. If we're not careful, this degenerates into a chiastic explanation, all the details of who these people are. I don't want any of that. I just want verse 12. Hope you're not helping her. Why are you looking at his Bible? You've got your own Bible. You look at your Bible. Have some space between you. Okay, now you look at your one and tell me what's going on. Sorry? Carry on. You said an army. What's the difference? Oh. Okay. An army? No, I want the story. Don't give me the words that are there. An army is given to who? 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 No, you tell me who. I don't want to interpret. Yeah. No, I want you to tell me who. I don't know what you mean by the interpretation. I don't know whose interpretation you mean. You tell me who.
An army is given to the papacy.
No, it didn't say papacy. Who? Don't help her, please. It's all about the methodology, the way we approach things. And the way we're approaching inspiration is dangerous. Because, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but you're a bigot. You're just copying what people have told you. And it's painful in front of 80 people to be shown that. I appreciate that. So, an army was given to whom? Nope. Okay. So, the word him, keep the Bible, we haven't finished. The word him, what do you call that in English? Pronoun. Okay? So it's speaking about someone that is not identifiable in that word. So if I said him, what does that infer if I said him? The noun has been mentioned before. When you said the noun, a noun or the noun? The noun. What do we call the? I want to say the definite article. So, as opposed to any article. So, if we said him, could we say a noun? No. Because then you'd have to say one of them and it becomes general. So when you say him, it's talking about something specific. Okay? So what do we want to find out? Who? Who the him is. So how are you going to find out who the him is? You go ahead and do that then. When you've got the answer, don't tell me what the answer is, but just say I've got the answer. Don't tell people what the answer is. Everybody's going to do the same thing you're doing. They're in verse 12, they're going to start going back and they're going to find out who the him is. When you have done that, tell me I've got it. But don't tell us what the answer is. Just so I get an idea. You tell us when you finished. You finished? Oh, I asked you to tell me. I was waiting for you. You got it? Don't give me the answer. Do you have the answer? That's yes. You have the answer. So now go back to verse 12 and tell me the first part. An army was given to... That's how you said it before, yes? So you tell me an army is given to... Everybody agree with that? Yes. Good, we all agree. So an army is given to the little horn. What's the problem? Verse 9 says what? The little horn destroys everything. Verse 12 says an army is given to the little horn. So we've got various approaches to try to understand what's going on. In verse 12, why is an army given to the little horn? Why is it received an army? My brother with the red top. Yeah. Why is an army given to the little horn? You do give me the sentence. An army is given to the little horn so that... Okay. And the purpose is to cook lunch.
To cast down the truth and also the other thing.
What's the purpose?
To cast down the truth to the ground.
Why do you need an army to do that?
Just to stand on his part and do that purpose.
I want to know what the purpose is. It must be something to do with armies. Tell me why you need an army.
Like
What are you doing?
According to how the verse reads is that an army was given him by the reason of transgression. So the army is going to support
Not the hymn, the horn. The army is going to support the horn. We've already done that. I'm asking you why.
I don't know the reason, but according to the
Okay, that's fine. If you're not sure the reason why. My brother. Why is an army given to this horn? Sorry? To take out the daily. So I don't want the details of it. I want the concept of why is an army being given to the horn. Not verse 9. Go through verse 12. I want to see something in verse 12. Okay, so I want to know what you think.
it's not strong enough.
Do the verse, please. An army. Carry on.
An army is given to him.
No. An army is given.
Because no longer strong enough.
Don't add the word longer unless you're sure about that. Doesn't say.
Strong enough.
Anyone else? Okay, I'm not. Someone else said that, and that's the right answer, but I don't want to know that. I want to know why is the army given. We've all got the right. He's got the right answer. An army is given to the little horn because he can't do the job himself. He's weak. Yep. We all okay with that? So how are we going to approach these verses from 9 to 12? In verse 9, what's he doing? Destroying everything. So what do we know about him? He's strong. What do we know about him in verse 12? He's weak. He's strong in 9 and he's weak in 12. So you have two options. What are the two options? It's a progressive story, or repeat and enlarge. Version 1, it's a progressive story. Everybody understand what progression means? Okay, so it's a progressive story. So, Brother Rogers, tell me the progressive story. No, I want a story, a simple story of what we've already just said. Put it together. I help. At the beginning, all by. Start again.
At the beginning, the little horn has power to destroy things by himself. At the end, he does not have power to destroy things by himself.
So he does what? So he needs help. Okay? If this is a progression, this is what this story is teaching. At the beginning, the little horn has power to destroy everything that's in front of him. But the change comes. And at the end, he has no power to do that. So he has to get an army to help him to do the same task. You agree with that? So now we have a structure, a story about the little horn. We have three powers in this chapter: a ram, a goat, and a little horn. Explains a lot of detail about the little horn, how it started, how it ended. Okay? That's one option. What's the second option? Repeat and enlarge. Who wants to do the repeat and enlarge? Brother Andrew. You've seen how we did the progression story. Do one with that.
Okay, I'm going to say at the beginning the little one was strong. Was strong enough that he would prosper, and the end also he was strong that he prospered.
What's prospering look like?
Prevail,
Sorry?
prevail,
What does prevail look like?
win,
Destruction of your enemies. How do you destroy enemies?
fight,
Using verse 12,
an army.
army. So what? Tell me what the repeated in large is.
At the beginning he had the army. The little one at the beginning had the army. That he used the army to destroy, and at the end also used the army to destroy.
Anyone else want to make a comment on that?
At the beginning, he was fighting alone. And now at the end, another power was added unto him in order to do the same task that he was doing. Therefore, we're going to see that it is the same power, but it's going to be repeated with additional power being added unto him.
So when I said repeat and enlarge, is this talking about the same history that's been mentioned in verse 9? Is verse 12 an explanation of verse 9? That's what repeat and enlarge would be, an explanation of it. Or is it two separate histories? How do you know it's two separate histories? How do you know that in verse 9, when he destroys everything, he destroys it because an army came and helped him? And verse 12 is an explanation of that. How do you know it's not that version?
Okay, if at the beginning, when it was destroying, it means that it had an hand. But between the verses, it does not tell us where that hand went or how did it lose the hand. So in verse 12, we find
How do you know it had an army in verse 9?
because in order to war, you must have a military.
We don't see any military with the ram and the goat. You just headbutt people and you kill them.
Yes, verse 9.
Verse 9, he's doing everything that the goat did. No mention of any armies for the goat. The goat has the power to do what it wants. In verse 9, he has power to do what he wants. So the question is that power inherent in him, or did he get some army to do it for him, as verse 12 explains? Is verse 12 an explanation of verse 9, or is it a completely different history? That's my question. How do you know which one it is, Brother Dickens?
I think in verse 9, he's able to do this because he's still young. And as time goes, when he's reaching verse 12, he's now getting old and there's no energy. Needs some hermit to come and help.
Okay, so
What I see when you go to the beginning of verse 9, then you are going to see that the one which is doing work is little on. When you can see that little on himself, there is the army. When you see, but when you come to verse 12, you are going to see that it's not going to be army again like the way it was, like the way it was before. So the question is that how come that when you come to verse 12, you are not going to see himself as army like the way it was? So when maybe you go to the concept of my brother, like maybe you may take example that like if you may be a soldier, there is a period where you are going to resign and all power they are going to be taken from you. So you are going to remain powerless, but before at the beginning when you were a soldier you were having those powers. So what is going to give you is going to give you this is going to give you two faces, which is going to be a different different history, and it's the same the same part which is going to be break down to history. So that is what I'm saying there.
Brother William. Verse 9 and verse 12. Repeat and enlarge your progression. You tell me. So in verse 9, has he been given an army to do this work? Or is he doing it all by himself?
In verse 9 is doing it for himself.
So it's not repeat and enlarge then. Repeat and enlarge means repeat the same story.
It's progression.
Okay, you explain why.
Because when you go to verse 9 and say, yeah, I think when you go to verse 9, we have a little horn which has power, which is able to fight for itself. And then you can see that progressive decrease in verse 12. It needs an army. It needs somebody to assist him to fight.
How do you know that verse 12 is not just an explanation of verse 9?
Because there is change of story.
What's changed?
No power, so nobody to assist. In verse 12, there is somebody who assists.
Maybe in verse 9, he didn't have any power, so he got an army, destroyed everybody, and we'll explain that in verse 12. We'll make you so sure that is not the right way to approach this.
Can you repeat what you said?
How do you know in verse 9, he was weak, he gets an army to help him, and he waxes great, destroys everything. That's what happened in verse 9, because the explanation is given in verse 12. Verse 12 gives the details of what's not in verse 9. How do you know that's not happening? Not sure?
So I was trying to have different thoughts, don't know whether they are going to make sense. So I was trying to see, when we come to verse 9, I would say the literal horn there has inherent power, is a kingdom. And when you come to verse 12, by comparing the two, I would see verse 12 as a combination of two things. So we already agree that the him, the literal horn here, cannot do anything by himself. So he needs help from an army. So I was trying to think that the host or the army that he receives, it cannot be an army. It must be something else that needs help of an army to act. So by looking at the two, I would say like these are two different literal horns. One requires an army, must not be an army, is something else. And the other one, which is verse 9, is an army, has that inherent power.
Sister Snyder? What is it that you don't know? I don't know what I don't know. Okay, most people here are going to say it's two different histories because most of us already know the answer, I guess. But why would you say it's two different histories?
So in verse 9 means conquering everything. Then in verse 11.
Oh, 11, you want to go to 11?
Sorry.
12, okay.
And in verse 12, it seems there's something else that remained elsewhere that is going to conquer.
Where'd you get, it seems, elsewhere?
Because it wasn't conquered in the first verse 9.
Okay, so I'm going to say verse 12 is just an explanation of what conquering looks like. I practiced and I prospered and I destroyed everything. I want to say, how do I know it's not repeat? Brother Robert. The question is, do you think this is progression? First he can do the job by himself and afterwards he needs some help. Or is verse 12 a detailed explanation of what happened in verse 9? This weak horn got an army to destroy things. Why not repeat? Why is verse 12 not a repeat of verse 9? Can you do it just with verse 9 and 12? It's what? Difficult. Because you do it. If you took out verse 10 and 11 and you just had verse 9 and verse 12, could you be certain that it's progression? Show me why then. Show me why verse 12 is not an explanation of the history of verse 9. Verse 9 is a period of time. We know that. It's covering 3 territories. Why is verse 12 not an explanation of what that looks like?
So in verse 9, he's coming against the south, the east, and the pleasant land. In verse 12, they see him wanting to come against a different power.
Okay, so in verse 9, it gives you 3 geographical areas, and in verse 12, it says he wants to come against or fight against the daily. Yes? Who had the hand up?
I'm seeing it as a story of progression, repeat and enlargement.
You see it as a progression?
Yeah.
Why?
Matthias explained now.
Oh, you were going to give the same reason. Okay, so let me just summarize what we've said, and because we're running out of time for the class. So we have verse 9 and verse 12, and we want to try to understand what's the relationship. Is it this person was strong before and now is suddenly weak and it needs an army to do its bidding or do this work? Or is verse 12 an explanation of how verse 9 operates? How would we approach that? So it's all too easy to say, well, you go to verse 10 and 11, and when you factor them in, then it helps you to come to a conclusion. And it would do. It does. But we want to try to have secondary and tertiary witnesses or logic to why we say what we say. This is a relatively simple exercise to do. It almost seems too obvious. But I want us to see that there are clues given in the verses themselves. So it took us about 10 minutes. Maybe some people already had the idea and they didn't put their hand up. Between the class, it took about 10 minutes to actually see that the target audience, the victim, is different. So, we would say, verse 9, this little horn, even if we said he gets an army, the little horn gets an army, doesn't say it in the verse, and when he got that army, he destroyed 3 territories, east, south, glorious land. Verse 12 says he gets an army to destroy something different, to destroy what it says in the passage, the daily. So then it becomes problematic if you want to try to defend, repeat and enlarge, that the daily would be the east, the south and the glorious land. Now, if you were to develop that study, could you demonstrate that the east, the south and the glorious land is the daily? Are you sure you couldn't? I'm pretty sure Brother Robert could. You could stretch that to make it fit. So at a simple level, there are two different entities. So let's say with this. In verse 9, I can destroy these three territories all by myself. They're weak, relatively. Okay with that, Sister Snyder? Now do verse 12. I'll start. I could destroy all of those three by myself, but
I cannot destroy this one without the help of
which one? Good. I cannot destroy the daily without some help, and the help is an army. Are we okay with that? Okay, so if you just go to verses 10 and 11, it's straightforward because it gives you this progressive concept or this progressive idea. So all I want us to see, based upon Sister Tess's study yesterday, not specifically looking at church and state or anything, but at the beginning, he was able to do everything by himself. You see this concept of a singularity here. And then when he wants to deal with some other issue, what happens? Now you see two things. And that's what you see here. You see this progression of two things. So the concept that was taught yesterday about a singular and then two is very similar to what we see here in verses 9 to verse 12. We obviously skipped verses 10 and 11. Verse 10. The horn is really strong. First of all, it did what? Destroyed 3 territories. Verse 10, now what's it going to do? Destroy what? A 4th. Now it's going to destroy a 4th. Everybody see that? Yeah, we don't know what it is, but it's going to destroy a 4th. Verse 11. He magnified himself, even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. Now if we wanted to just take a surface reading of this, without all the complexities of who is who and what's going on, the little horn is a single entity. Now by the time you get to verse 11, what's verse 11 saying? What's he want to do? He's going to kill a prince, and what else? What's he going to destroy? He's going to destroy the daily. How's he going to destroy the daily? Sorry? How does he take the daily away? Can he take the daily away by himself? That's verse 12. With the help of the host. So verse 11 and verse 12 would be repeat and enlarge. Verse 12 tells you how he goes about doing that activity, if you were going to read it this way. Now, of course, verse 11 is not that straightforward. It's complex. But that's how most people would read these verses. If you're going to do a surface reading. So 9 and 10, he can do all of that by himself. Bring down 4 entities. Now, when he wants to come and bring down this other entity, talks about the prince of the army, and it talks about the daily, and it talks about the place of his sanctuary. When it's dealing with that, now it needs an army to do all of that work. Okay, so that's what a surface reading would be. You'd have to do some gymnastics to actually work out the details.
I don't know whether this would make some sense, because what I see in verse 9 and verse 12, it becomes strong, sorry, and out of one of them came forth with the horn, which was the seed. Then when it comes to verse 12, the seed becomes weak. My own understanding, could it have been that, because in between here there is a difference, that caused the horn to become weak, make a fight with the sword.
Say that little bit again.
What I'm trying to say, in this big important topic about it, because in verse 9, I'm seeing that it's strong.
Yes.
Then it comes to verse 12, it becomes weak.
Yes.
You see an element of cause here, because there's something that causes.
It's something that causes it to become weak. Is that what you said? What?
So what I'm trying to say that, is it necessary or does it make some sense to include in that progression?
Okay, is it necessary or is it helpful to see what would make it weak? So, all I wanted to do was for us to see how we would approach the passage, because often when we approach this, we go into the details, and in fact most of us don't even do that. Most of us are fed how to approach these passages. We go to gender oscillation, we talk about pagan Rome, papal Rome, we're told what each verse is, and we just run with that, and then what we do is we develop a story based upon the preconceived ideas that we already have. So I didn't want to do that, just assume that we didn't know any of that, and how would we approach these verses. So coming back to our original question, the vision ends in verse 12. He receives an army to finish his work off, and the army is there to destroy the daily, and also once the daily is destroyed, then it casts the truth to the ground, and it practices and it prospers. So there are different things that are being attacked in verse 12 that it's not able to do without this army. It needs an army to do that. So that's the end of the story of the little horn, verse 12. Then he hears two saints speaking. So what we want to know is, when does that verse end? We'd also want to know when the verse began. So if you went to verse 9, where would we see verse 9 occurring? Where this little horn begins its activities, and at the end of verse 12 it ends its activities. So in order to answer that, you'd need to know who the little horn is, wouldn't you? Yeah? And Daniel chapter 8 is not going to tell you who the little horn is. All it's going to do is tell you what? 8:23. At the end of their kingdom, when... what's the definition of end? When the sins are full, when the transgressions have come to the full. Where do we get this idea of transgression or sin coming to its end? Daniel 9. We use the term close of probation, end of testing. So once they've come to their end, then another king's going to come, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences. He shall stand up, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power, and he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. Can we see verse 24 is an explanation of which verse? Verse 12. Where do we pick that up? It says, and his power shall be mighty, but not his own power. It's the power of the host, the army. He shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, taken straight from verse 12, and he shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. And through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many, and he shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hands. So not only is he going to use an army, what else is he going to use? He's going to use peace to do this work. So this would be a big study to explain and understand what's going on. So that all that work has really been done for us. I think it's correct. So this is a story about pagan Rome and papal Rome. So by the time you get to verse 12, it's practiced and it's prospered. And then you get to verse 25. Verse 25 is a repeat and enlarge of verse 12, yes? So he's given an army, he's going to do all of these things, and then what happens? The verse stops. It just says he practices and prospers. What happens at the end of your practicing and prospering? What happened at the end of practicing and prospering? You would stop practicing, prospering. How do we know that? Because it's come to its end. If you continue to practice and prosper, you wouldn't have an end to that, would you? Yeah? So the end of verse 12, what causes the end of verse 12? It's explained in what verse? Verse 25. Verse 25, what happens to end all of this? He's broken. Okay? So some power breaks him. So that's the end of the vision. So if this is papal Rome, and we identified the breaking of the papacy without hand, without discussing what that means, what year, my sister, coming all the way back, what year is this little horn broken without hands? If we say it's the papacy. 1798. So Daniel chapter 8 is a story about 1798. Can we all see that? That's what the vision is about. The vision is about 1798. We say the vision is about 2300 days, 1844. I say we, that's what the discussion is about. So you have two versions of this vision. One is what you see, and one is what you hear. And you get different answers to the two, don't you? Because what you see, does it take you to 1798? Yes, what you see takes you to 1798. You see this horn practicing, and then he gets broken. You don't see the horn being taken to 1844. Everybody okay with that? So now there's an explanation that's going to be given, a discussion. You hear it, you don't see it. You hear two saints speaking. And when they speak, verse 13, it says, "How long shall be the vision that's dealing with the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot?" And the answer is 2300 days. So now we have to explain the relationship between the vision of chapter 8, which ends in 1798, and the story or the explanation, the discussion that's given later on, which brings you to 1844. So there's this tension between the two. We all agree with that. Everyone can see that now, hopefully. So it's a lot more complex than we first anticipate how to deal with Daniel chapter 8. What the host is, what the sanctuary is, it all becomes complex. Daniel doesn't understand any of this, which makes him foolish. In chapter 9, he's going to study the book of Jeremiah. Does it help him? No. Just confirms him in his misunderstanding. Gabriel comes and explains to him further what's going on. Chapter 9 takes you where? To 1798, takes you to the same place as Daniel chapter 8 does. It's a complete repeat and enlarge of Daniel chapter 8, just a different perspective. Can everybody see 1798 in chapter 9? You can see that, my sister? Where do you see that? Give me the verse and give me the little phrase that says that. Verse 25. We're in chapter 9, 25. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks, 62 weeks. Do you say verse 25? 8 to 25. We're in chapter 9, not chapter 8. My question is, in chapter 9, where do you see a repeat and enlarge of chapter 8? Chapter 8 takes you to 1798. Where do you see 1798 in chapter 9? That was my question. Verse 26. Which portion? Which part? Read the phrase.
At the end thereof shall be the flood, and unto the end of the war, desolation shall come.
And how do you see 1798 there?
It's not easy to see, but they connect it to the flood. Verse 60.
Okay, so you're going to go to Revelation 12 to 1260. My brother?
I want to see it from 27.
Verse 27.
So it's going to say that even until the consummation. So consummation is like the end of everything. And then that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. So the person who was desolating, they're going to pour something on him. So the person that was doing that work was the little ability to go back. So if something is poured on it, it's in 1798.
So we're going to go to the end of 26 and the end of 27. Both talk about the end of the war. One speaks about the flood, and one speaks about the desolator. It says desolate in the King James, but there's a marginal reading, which is the desolator, the destroyer. So one talks about the end of the war, and we saw war in chapter 8, and verse 27, it says it's the end of the desolator, the end of the destroyer. The end of the destroyer is shown in 825, where the destroyer is broken. Everybody can see that? Who cannot see that? 925. Often we go to verse 24, 25, takes you to AD 34. Then from AD 34, you can go into verses 26 and 27, and it has this long story that talks about destruction and war, tells you why the warfare is happening, and then the last part of verse 27 says, even the one that was destroying, he will be destroyed. That's what the last part of verse 27 says, which is a repeat and enlarge of 825. This fierce king, the fierce king is the little horn, he shall be broken without hands. Everyone okay with that? So we see a clear repeat and enlarge. Chapter 9 takes you to the same place as chapter 8 does. And all of this is bringing you to the latter days, the end of the world. We saw that in 228. We read 10:14. What says?
The one that brings you to 1798.
You can only see it in verse 27.
Yeah. But not in 26.
You can't see it in verse 26. So in verse 26, it says the end of the war. Which war is that? Okay, so if you see verse 26 and verse 27 as a repeat and enlarge, you see it's the same war. Verse 27 says desolations or destructions. That's war being prosecuted against someone. It's the same war that's in verse 26. It's the same war that's in Daniel chapter 8. This king of fierce countenance making war. But what my brother noticed was that he picked up the word flood. The end of this war will look like a flood. So there's a symbol of what this war will look like. It begins by looking like something, and it ends by looking like something different. You can see that in the verse? Can't see that? Verse 26. How does it begin? What does it look like when it first begins? Who said flood? What does it begin? What does it look like when it first begins? You said it at the end it looks like, what does it look like at the beginning? No, your argument was at the end it looks like flood. It says, and the end thereof shall look like a flood. So if the end looks like a flood, you tell me the beginning looks like a flood? If you do that, you destroy your own logic. Brother Rogers, what does the beginning look like? Good answer. It's somewhere in the words. Brother William.
You said it's in the verse, so that I don't.
No, he said it's in the verse. I was just mocking him. Maybe we read the verse differently.
In the beginning, it looks like a group of.
Give me the word. People. My brother says it begins by looking like people and it ends by looking like flood. Are we okay with that? He's got a specific interpretation of the verse. Some people see it differently because now they're going to define who the prince is. So he's got a particular perspective of who the prince is. He says the prince is the fierce king. Is that right? No? Who's the prince? Is the people the army of the prince? Is that how you would read that? Yeah? Yes? Or no? I didn't answer what your reply is.
I'm still thinking.
Okay. We'll close. It's breakfast time. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we want to give you praise and thanks for your goodness and your mercy. We ask, Lord, that you would guide and direct us into a correct understanding of what your word teaches. When we consider Daniel chapter 8 and chapter 9, the focus is on the latter days. Help us, Lord, also to understand what's going to happen in these latter days, because these very things are being fulfilled in our own history. Be with us and bless us. We ask for a special blessing upon the food we're also to eat now. In Jesus' name.